Surprise! Here's a brand new series where I interpret the birth charts of famous, old school actresses and actors. Vintage Hollywood. Enjoy! Mwah. Hey crew, I'm Lexi, your local lightworker. I'm a tarot reader and an astrologer. Welcome to Vintage Hollywood, the series that allows me to explore the birth charts of famous vintage celebrities for your viewing pleasure. I'm particularly excited about this series because it will allow me the scope and the topic to explore different Pluto transits. As you guys know, in Astrohunks and Astrobabes, the companion series to this astrology series, I usually look at the birth charts of people that have Pluto in Virgo, Pluto in Libra, Pluto in Scorpio, and Pluto in Sagittarius. Oftentimes, I also include one or two Pluto in Leo, just like it happened with Jane Seymour's Astrobabes. But I'm really excited about this vintage collection because I'll be able to talk to you about Pluto in Taurus, Pluto in Gemini, and Pluto in Cancer. Aside from that, I'm super excited about creating this series because maybe you are a vintage Hollywood fan like myself. I hope this series would reach those that are interested in vintage black and white cinematography as much as I am. I decided to begin first with the interpretation of the birth chart of Humphrey Bogart, who has been for a very long time one of my favorite vintage leading men. I mean, literally, I have images like this one hanging around my house. This one is actually taken from my bathroom. Enough about that, let's get into Humphrey's analysis. Of course, you know Humphrey from the infamous Casablanca, one of the greatest movies of all times. Aside from Casablanca, I'm sure that you are familiar with Humphrey's work from two other important crime thrillers. This is The Big Sleep, a movie that was created by Howard Hawks, and it was adapted after a novel by Raymond Chandler. And in addition to this, Humphrey also starred in The Maltese Falcon. This is a movie adapted from a novel by Dashiell Hammett. In The Big Sleep, he also met his future wife, Lauren Bacall, the actress with whom he shared a beautiful love connection. Funnily enough, he would be his third wife and actually his final wife, and I can talk a bit more about the synastry in their chart towards the end of this clip because they have an interested fated marker that touches upon her Saturn return and his second Saturn return when unfortunately he actually passed away. Now, coming back to the movies that you might know him from, you guys know that I have slightly quirky tastes. I like things that are a little bit off the beaten track, not things that are obviously liked by a lot of people. I'm a bit of a hipster in that regard. I really enjoy Humphrey in a boutique movie called In a Lonely Place, where he stars alongside the luminous Gloria Graham, a little known actress that has amazing chemistry with Humphrey in this movie. So I strongly recommend that if you're a Humphrey fan, go and watch In a Lonely Place. You will not regret it. Now, Humphrey starred with his wife, Lauren Bacall, in a variety of movies. He actually filmed them pretty closely back to back in the 40s. Aside from The Big Sleep, they also starred together in Key Largo, and they also collaborated in a movie that became one of my all-time favorite noir movies, Dark Passage. I really like in this movie, I remember the first time when I saw it, it's shot from a first-person perspective for the first 30 or so minutes. I thought that this was so innovative for a movie of the time. You usually get quite classical interpretations, or you get this kind of third-person perspective. But in Dark Passage, most of the time you just see Humphrey's hands for the first part of the movie. And the hands are really significant because we are going to talk in a second about Pluto and Gemini. Gemini. Other significant performances of Bogey in his final years were alongside Ava Gardner in The Barefoot Contessa, and also in the classic Sabrina, where he played Audrey Hepburn's forlorn love interest. Strangely enough, in spite of the fact that he created these iconic, dark, dashing detectives that are stoic, a little bit drunkard, but always efficient and always solving the cases, Humphrey didn't get an Oscar for those performances. He finally got the Oscar for The African Queen, a movie in which he stars alongside Katharine Hepburn, and a movie that is also shot in color. I personally find this movie to be my least favorite, also because of the character that he plays and the fact that he is no longer shot in that incredible black and white hue that fits him so well. Because we can actually sit here and talk about an individual's birth chart for a whole week, even longer than that potentially, I'm only going to focus on 5 key aspects from Humphrey's chart, those that I find most significant and that color his personality in a specific way, and I want to link those to the choice of roles and to the overall personal details of his life, and especially his connection with Lauren Bacall. I'm only going to cherry pick a couple of instances. I'm not going to discuss his whole opus of work, his whole childhood or career. I'm only going to focus on specific instances that I find that correlate really interestingly with his astrological influences. So before I dive into them, here is his birth chart. The first thing I'd like to talk to you guys about is the controversy surrounding his ascendant. I did some digging and I could find 2 contradictory versions of his natal chart. In one case, he is shown as having a Venusian Taurus ascendant, and in other situations, he is shown as having a Martian Aries ascendant. Now, which one of the 2 versions should we believe when we don't know with accuracy his exact birth time? I would personally go for the Aries ascendant. I think he is more a proponent of Martian energy than Venusian sweetness, beauty, and afterglow. Why would I say that? It's also because with an Aries ascendant, it's not only necessarily just having this rough and masculine and stoic and kind of courageous, ready to jump into action at the slightest threat kind of vibe, but this would also place his Capricorn stellium in his 10th house rather than spread across his 9th and 8th houses. I personally see him as a very strong representative of a person that left behind a very masculine, stoic, and kind of aggressive kind of legacy, a guy that is super experienced and that puts people back into their place. And this would fit very well with an Aries ascendant, which can be quite intimidating and threatened when provoked. And also, it will also fit with the fact that his Sun and Mars will be conjunct his midheaven, again reinforcing this image of deep masculinity and no BS in his public roles. So to me, this makes more sense than actually having a Venusian ascendant, which indeed you could argue because of the fact that Humphrey has quite dark features and quite calm, steady eyes. He has quite a robust approach to the way he interacts with other people. He's a man of few words, but this would go, in my view, as an astrologer, from what I know from my clients and from the things that I've been experiencing as well, I think this fits much, much better with an Aries ascendant rather than with a Taurus ascendant. So this is why I opted for the Aries ascendant version, and I hope that this clarifies a little bit for those of you that are looking up Humphrey's birth chart and you're wondering, why do I get 2 different ascendants? Well, it's because of the fact that we cannot say with accuracy the time on his birth certificate. I don't even know who was able to procure a birth certificate in New York at the turn of the century for him. If you guys know, if you've been doing some sort of like legal documents digging, if you've been looking at old-fashioned documents, please let me know down in the comments below. I'd be super curious to hear from you guys. But for the time being, I'm just going to go with this Aries ascendant option, which puts his Capricorn stellium on the midheaven in the 10th house. And boy, did Humphrey had to work to actually actually achieve this public role and this perception of the public of him as a charismatic, highly masculine, stoic figure. I also love the fact that he makes fun of his features. Often in his movies, his characters always kind of allude to the fact that his features stand out in a way, and not necessarily in the best possible aesthetic kind of way. His charm actually comes not necessarily from the symmetry of his looks or from how handsome his chin looks like. It comes from the fact that he is intelligent. It comes from the fact that he's observant, he's charismatic, and he doesn't take no for an answer. He's a very determined character in most of his movies. I especially love about him his self-awareness, and there is a sheen of modesty that coats his characters. This is a guy that is not looking for trouble necessarily if he can avoid it, but oftentimes trouble comes and finds him. Okay, the other significant thing I would like to talk to you about is his moon in Libra. Now, a moon in Libra is a really interesting way of actually engaging with your emotions. Having an Aries ascendant, it would place his Libra moon in the 7th house. This is the house of other people, his connection to his marriage partners, his business partnerships, and also the realm of the shadow self. Having a moon in the 7th house would make a man more emotionally attached to women, and especially to his lifelong partners. I think that Humphrey was only able to show his true feelings in privacy. Libras tend to come across as quite the justice-prone individuals. They love things that are beautiful. They love to keep their energy quite balanced. They don't like excesses. They tend to step into situations of conflict and help people negotiate. The interesting part is that Humphrey was actually born into a family that was considered to be an unhappy home. His father didn't really appreciate being married to his mother, who was a wealthy heiress. And there's another reason why his mother has this placement and why she was actually a person with a lot of wealth. I'll talk about this in the 3rd point. But what I do want to talk about is his moon in Libra and how children with moons in Libras usually tend to be born into families where there is a lot of conflict, a lot of animosity, because they are meant to bring this Venusian harmonious energy into the reconciliation of the two parts. So he was born in a family where his father was arguing a lot with his mother, but also his father tended to be quite physically tough on him. He used to apply physical punishments to Humphrey, which in turn might have been a consequence of the fact why he took on drinking and heavy smoking later on in his life. A moon in Libra as well gives the native a highly investigative kind of energy. This is a person that is concerned with finding the truth and actually taking in a variety of different or competing viewpoints in order to reach a certain consensus. This is usually the placement of a very good judge, of a strong moral character. Moon in Libras, as a side note, are really drawn to beautiful smells as well, beautiful people, parties, weddings, ceremonies. I think that Humphrey really came to life when he was surrounded by people that would somehow celebrate his accomplishments, or whenever he appeared in some sort of public setting together with his partner. I feel that that is where his heart was actually lying, in these public appearances, in these moments when he felt like he could actually be seen and acknowledged for his hard work and for the people that he associated with. It's almost like the relationships that a moon in Libra makes with other people in their life, they become part of their identity. So there might have been some issues there regarding personal boundaries, and this doesn't surprise me because it segues really beautifully into the 3rd significant point in his chart. The other significant aspect is his Capricorn stellium, or more like a cluster of planets. He is a Sun in Capricorn, conjunct Venus in Capricorn, conjunct Mars in Capricorn, and a little known aspect called the part of fortune. So it was meant to be for him to be born into a wealthy family, but unfortunately with Capricorn energy there, he had to struggle a lot as he was growing up. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, the planet of limitations, restrictions, stoicism, the planet that handles a lot of challenges or kind of peppers a lot of obstacles on your life path, so that by overcoming them, you actually develop a lot of inner strength and you reach a level of self-mastery that sets you apart from everybody else around you. He was born with a father that was quite physically punishing and a mother that did not get along with his father, but into relative wealth. His full name is actually Humphrey Bogart, which sounds incredibly classy if you actually come to think of it. He was also born at the turn of the century, which was a time of massive collective societal and political changes, ushering in the really industrialized, technologized, and pretty badass 20th century. And we all know the trauma that happened in the 20th century. Poor Humphrey, he actually had to grow up through all of that. A stellium is basically just a conglomeration of planets in a chart that shows you that you really need to focus in a concentrated way on the themes and on the energy of the sign where you have that specific cluster of planets. It's to concentrate all of his energy into being a Capricorn and into dealing with women and men that actively help him develop his identity. When you have Venus conjunct Mars, this is a really interesting aspect. It makes you incredibly magnetic to members of the same sex and of the opposite sex. It makes you highly endowed with sex appeal. Like, you're this kind of person that will always have sexual and romantic conquests, that will always be propositioned, and there will always be opportunities for you to kind of, you know, do some funny erotic stuff on the down low. Do you guys remember this really hot scene in The Big Sleep in the librarian's bookstore? Oh my god, if you could bottle up the tension between the two of them in this really awesome scene when he goes and looks for a specific manuscript and the bookseller is showing him a really rare book, and outside it starts raining. She closes the shop and they actually have a little bit of a afternoon drink. Interesting tension explored there. I absolutely love that. It's significant to my mind that this exchange between the two of them happens in a bookstore, which kind of segues very beautifully into the other significant part of his chart. So let's talk about his Pluto in Gemini, the fourth significant placement in his chart. Humphrey has his Pluto in Gemini conjunct his South Node and Neptune. So this adds an extra layer of glamour because Neptune in Gemini talks about some sort of elusive, lying-prone types of communication, gossip that can really create a lot of social chaos around you. There could be here some issues regarding hands and holding a lot of alcoholic beverages. Might be some issues here regarding processing your emotions through your hands, such as when you get really angry and you want to use your hand to create a fist and to punch somebody. For example, as I mentioned in the beginning, in his movie Dark Passage, in the first part of the movie, we just see everything from a first-person perspective, almost like a shooter game, and we just see his hands and how he maneuvers things. Most of the power and the way in which he acts in the first part of that movie comes from how he handles his digits. Pluto in Gemini on the South Node shows an individual that has been using his mind to an excess in a previous lifetime. This is an individual that could have shared information that might have slandered other people. Usually when you have Pluto and Gemini conjunct the South Node, you could have been a person that incriminated somebody else that might have actually been unfairly judged by the community. Such as, for example, a person that would unfairly accuse a woman of witchcraft, and then she would be trialed and hanged for that crime. In addition, as I mentioned, Neptune adds this coating of what is the truth? What kind of information do I need to put together in order to reach the real truth of the matter? And this is especially significant because all of this energy in Gemini and Humphrey's chart is actually sitting opposite from a group of planets in Sagittarius. This segues really beautifully into the fifth important marker in Humphrey's chart. We see here very clearly the strong Sagittarius fire-bending energy that Humphrey has in his chart, and that I think propelled him to this great fame, great wealth that stood the test of time. Usually in the chart of performers, you want to see Neptune on a really significant placement, and we see that he was a natural born actor with Neptune conjunct the South Node and Pluto. And in addition to this, you want to see some planets in fire signs. The majority of people that are active in Hollywood have at least one or a couple of planets in fire energy. That is the red carpet kind of energy. That is the look at me, look at how good I can actually say this line, look at how charismatic and hot I look on the silver screen. So his stellium in Sagittarius is composed of the following planets: Saturn, Mercury, Uranus. This is a really lucky mofo. He was actually given so many planets in Capricorn as well, so that he learns to be patient with the natural unfolding of his specific karma. In addition to this, his moon in Libra helps him balance himself out emotionally through these situations of extreme tension. So we see very clearly here that it was very difficult for Humphrey to actually grow into these energies, to learn to adapt to limits, to learn to cope with measuring things, but also to not go to excesses. I think the fact that he is a heavy drinker and a heavy smoker speak about the way in which he tried to process this father trauma by ingesting a lot of things, Jupiter energy. So the fact that all of this energy is conjunct his North Node tells me that his lifetime is a lot about him getting accustomed to winning things, to actually getting awards, to becoming more known and a global, internationally famous actor, to having a lot and to actually taking advantage of the pleasures of life. It is also a lifetime of healing, of growth, and of extracting wisdom from the many difficult experiences in his reality. The fact that he's a man of few words and the fact that he might not be a person that actually enjoys change a lot speaks about his Mercury conjunct Uranus placement in combination with all of the other placements with Saturn, North Node, and Jupiter. So I think that this is an individual that truly had to cope with random spontaneous limitations and impose stoicism from the exterior world from a very young age, but usually he would find a quick reprieve or a quick solution to these random, spontaneous, erratic energies that he had to grow up with, and I think that predominantly were coming from the father. He then grew up to internalize this energy, and that's why he is playing these detectives who are stoic, Saturn, but they're also quite lucky, Jupiter, who need to do a lot of investigative work through the questions that they ask and digging for the truth by truly looking into what people say and how they say it, and never taking a sentence for granted. Mercury conjunct the North Node, but also Pluto and Gemini conjunct the South Node. In addition to this, he was also needing to take more into account spontaneous random occurrences, like what happens to him in Key Largo, where he goes and he visits this place that all of a sudden gets ambushed by a group of crooks. The whole movie creates this atmosphere of tension, and it's only amplified by the fact that he's also simultaneously falling in love with a character played by Lauren Bacall, and they have to survive it through the night alongside these really terrible individuals that have taken them hostage. Now, the final part that I want to talk to you about is about the synastry between Lauren and Humphrey. It's so funny because Hollywood referred to them as Bogey and Bacall, the couple that were really the sweethearts of the noir movies of the time. They had some pretty awesome placements, but a lot of this had to do with sexual physical passion. Who would have thought? When you look at them, they look like two earth signs, a Virgo and a Capricorn, making a very moral and stable marriage. But actually, these guys, oh mama, they had a lot of energy in between the sheets. Why am I saying this? Well, because Lauren's sun sign in Virgo is conjunct in the synastry chart with Humphrey, is conjunct his Lilith in Virgo. This talks about wild, untamed energy. So basically the way that Lauren was, the way in which she radiated, the way in which she expressed herself, and the way she naturally came across really turned Humphrey on. But at the same time, it kind of frightened him because Lilith is this wild, untamed feminine energy. So I feel that on one hand, he felt very emotionally attracted to her, sexually and physically really turned on by her, but at the same time, he might have also felt like he couldn't control her, like she was wild and quite emotional compared to his own stoic nature. And this is further amplified by the fact that her ascendant in Cancer, which made her very shy and made her kind of have that famous Bacall look, which she created based on the fact that she was too shy to stare directly into the camera, so he needed to kind of help her by lifting her up from the chin. Again, that infamous chin lift that is both quite parental but at the same time quite soulful and interesting to look at in these noir movies. I think it just adds such a level of depth and intimacy established between the characters in this movie. So her ascendant in Cancer is actually opposite his Sun, Venus, and Mars. Again, another marker of intense physical and sexual attraction. Venus, the planet of beauty and love, and Mars, the planet of erotical attraction, willpower, and kind of physicality, were both in Humphrey's chart opposite from Lauren's Cancer ascendant. So again, it just shows a really strong degree of physical passion between the two of them. Their connection was also a deeply karmic one as well. She met him when she was very young, and the really interesting part is that they stayed together up until her first Saturn return. At the age of 28, as soon as the planet Saturn returned to the natal position at which it found itself in Lauren's chart, Humphrey was actually becoming sicker and sicker with esophageal cancer, which was predominantly created by the fact that he was such a heavy smoker. So as Humphrey was approaching his second Saturn return in his 50s, and Lauren was approaching her first Saturn return around the young age of 28 and a half years old, Humphrey actually passed on, leaving her a widow. Now, there were other people in Lauren's life, but there was never this kind of radiance that emanated so strongly from the period of time when she both was living together with Humphrey and also working together with him on some of the most significant noir movies of the 40s. I really like him. I really like her. I think that together they make such a dream couple, but it's also sad to see as well how they got separated by the recurrent transits of Saturn. I hope you have enjoyed this clip. Let me know down below. Do you enjoy Humphrey? What do you think about his roles? What is your favorite role of his? And let me know as well who should be the next person whose vintage Hollywood chart I should interpret. Until next time, I'm sending you lots of light.